And thus the Lord saith, the love of core mechanic is the root of all evil. Let's start at the summit of the mountain until we meet the anglerfish. Virtual entertainment corporations have a demographic to appeal to so that they can generate revenue. Who is that demographic? Gamers. All ages, both sexes, different genders. All shapes and sizes, with the incentive of prestige and financial gain being the motivation for the youth to get as good as its elder. We all carry a basic understanding of what things mean while we're playing a favorite game of ours in order to maintain our sanity while we play it, right? This understanding comes from what the company presents us both in detail and at face value. Detail being observed by the mature, and face value being worshipped by the ignorant. You can't blame them, both make perfect sense. If you put a 10-year-old kid in front of an arcade cabinet for the new challenges, then by the end of the intro, they're going to pick Ryu without question, because the corporation just made him look invincible. Poor Sap's gonna have their first run into William F. Guile, who's gonna beat their ass for 2 straight rounds, tell him to go home and be a family man. The hardened veteran with all the tournament knowledge is gonna pick Boxer and headbutt their way to Gokida. The difference in these two concepts is nothing more than knowledge. The tournament shark is aware of every other character's powers on the roster. The kiddo just watched Super Karate Man produce the screen in the introduction. The desire of the youth to get good with Ryu comes from their conceived protagonist intent, much like the reason why the good guy cheers for Son Goku. The main character of a fighting game is often hyped to a kid as its be-all end-all, when in reality they were only ever hyped as the selling point for the franchise. It's a dirty dynamic, but business isn't clean. Most importantly, it works. Most children don't have a concept of money. They're sliding a play as their favorite character and an escape from reality into the coin slot on that cabinet. That child in their first playthrough is under the belief that the system used by the main character is the definitive opposition. Then that poor kid has to suffer against the shenanigans of the entire roster. In their perfect world, they'd only ever face another Shoto. Which is interesting because what if that was the case? Think about it. Hoshi Ryu versus Vito Sagato. But Sagato was a tall palette swap of Ryu with all of his moves. Like if he had a high Hadouken, a low Hadouken, and the Hibiki knee had no records. Like it was just a Tatsumeki Senpu knee. His super was that knee into a DP, and the Shoryuken was 3 to 7 hits. You'd probably say that it was a blatant poop on the core mechanics, and that this Shoto was, as they say, broken. But what if I told you that this version of Sagato had his normal move list, and that the frame data on all of his moves were down bad? The presumed advantages that Sagato had over Ryu suddenly turned into a challenge, with the need for the reactions to come from a galaxy brain just to defeat Ryu. The worst part being that neither of these characters possess the mechanics that other characters in this franchise do. If, in this hypothetical Man in Karate Gi Fighter 2 video game, there was a palette swap of Ryu that moved much slower, but could block the Hadouken without damage, and had the ability to throw Ryu without being thrown, even if they both pressed throw. If you've ever played a single game in the franchise, then you know that I just described Zangief. Yet, once again, if you've never played the game, but now you have the knowledge of how this goes, then you have to ask out of pure objective. If this is the case, then how would victory with Ryu even be possible? To which I have to tell you that you're right. They're professional gamers. People who spend their entire lives pressing the buttons forward, down, down, forward on arcade boxes and controllers that don't have the matchup versus Zangief down to a science. This character is available for standard play, thus making the command grab a casually undeniable core mechanic. A mechanic that beats a completely undeniable core mechanic. The throw. All characters have throws. Few have a command grab. And if executed properly, then these moves cannot be resisted by any other core mechanic. You will find more core mechanics like this throughout many kinds of competitive gaming, like Dr. Jeffrey's Whooper in Pokemon, A strategy given to few characters whom are part of a roster for a game that essentially nullified the ability for most of the cast to be able to do anything about it at all. The counterplay for such strong capabilities are often few and far between, or neither here nor there. Any combatant unlucky enough to get hit by these kinds of core mechanics without a game plan often leave matches without their pride intact, believing the risk and reward for their uses to come at a balance so unfair that their very use could be considered as some sort of cheat. To that I say, are they really that far into the role? If the concept that all I have to do now that you selected this strategy is select this strategy, and now I have a noticeably wide margin of advantage exists, then the only thing separating it from being a cheat code is certain victory. As long as I don't cough, sneeze, break me fingers, fall asleep, or leave the cabinet, I can now execute my knowledge of the strategy and then I'm going to win. It's like Akuma vs. Akuma until Alpha 2. The fighting game is the recognition that anything is possible between two players, not that anything is possible. Ni had a bad day, and Rong Chu played out of his mind. Devil Jin's AI would have 2-0'd Panda. If I were to have to beckon a morality at the end of this, then it would be where to draw the line at core mechanics. If every concept in a fighting game possessed multiple ways to counteract its every core mechanic, then the risk of every move would be just as high as its reward. Never before have I ever played a game that does. It would create a game that would be, I don't know, fair and balanced for those who looked into every one of the game's core mechanics. There should be moves for every grappler that block projectiles, and put them in a distance for a command grab. The command grab that a zoner should be able to tech and leap away from to prevent loops. And the very concept of being unable to reliably utilize special moves for certain victory would provide incentive to use normal moves for things like space closing and conditioning. It will provide a reason for the casual player to want to play the whole of the game. But no! Just Capcom using V-Trigger and spamming Budokan, a bunch of old heads holding on to the sentiment of moment 37. The players at the highest level all realize what danger lies in the other player's lack of appreciation for an entire game because of a core mechanic that is available to some or all characters that's just too powerful. Why didn't they bring back Sadamo? Even if it's not because of international discrepancies and the whole world agreed to call him Katana, then it's because his core mechanics are too powerful for the meta of a side-scroller fighting game. If a character like a Dhalsim just wants to do its job and use roundhouse from neutral to force an opponent to duck or stay at distance so that he can throw projectiles or teleport later, but this big burly dude comes sliding through his attacks with a weapon, then 75% of his game plan goes unusable because of ridiculously high priority records that will lead to the overpowering of his moves or into unfair trades. To think, if Muno Ken was made legal for tournament play, there would only be one of two results. The best players in the world would turn it into Street Fighter V Melee and only participate in tournaments as Ryu wins versus Ryu wins, or everyone would drop the game altogether. There's no in between. For the changes that could be made that would be seen as improvement, as I stated in the last video I made for Street Fighter 6, the developers will never listen. And have that be the case, the games will continue to be unfair and unbalanced, heading right into a new generation. And it's sad to see. If you agree, please leave a like. If you enjoy, please subscribe. And I'll see you lot in another video.